and he's going to be speaking to us today about a worldwide mission of reconciliation. Arnaud has been part of Lawyers Without Borders in Canada since February 2018. And he was first involved with Lawyers Without Borders projects as a voluntary legal advisor in Colombia and in Peru. Since March of 2020, he's working as a legal advisor at their head office in Quebec City on issues pertaining to the fight against corruption and human trafficking, among others. Arnaud is a registered lawyer at the Bar of Quebec and holds a master's in international law and politics from the Université de Sherbrooke. He's worked as a legal advisor at the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. And today he's going to be discussing the fight against human trafficking and sexual exploitation. In particular, the recent partnership that Lawyers Without Borders has made with the City of Montreal Police Department to identify good practices among their specialized police unit responsible for procuring and sexual exploitation. With that, Mr. Cloutier, I give you the floor, and everybody, as I say, we are recording this. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them into the chat box, and we'll take care of them all at the end of Arnaud's presentation. To you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here to share our experiences as an international organization based in Quebec, Canada. And you may excuse me if my English is not as fluid as I would like. I'm mainly working in French and Spanish right now, so sometimes maybe the English expressions might be a bit off. So as Mr. President said, today's topic is mainly centered on our experiences in the fight against human trafficking and especially the sexual exploitation in Central America, and how those practices and interaction with local actors as the Montreal Police has benefited our projects in Central America. So I will start with a brief presentation of Lawyers Without Borders Canada. If for those who don't know us, we're a non-governmental international cooperation organization whose mission is to support the defense of human rights of people in a situation of vulnerability by strengthening their access to justice and legal representation. We implement cooperation projects since 2005 in many countries in Latin America and Africa. We also encourage transitional justice processes in countries shifting from armed conflict or dictatorship to the establishment of the rule of law. And our approach has various components. We work by strengthening the capacities of state actors and civil society organizations toward the realization of human rights, and especially the victims' rights. We have supported truth commissions, wide-scale reparation programs, actors from the justice systems, in order to offer a better response to widespread human rights violation in a way that is consistent with international standards and international law. We also do some advocacy, strategic litigation, and sensibilization. We work in sensibilization campaign to only name a few. So our focus is mainly to defend the victims of human rights violation, and in particular women and other vulnerable groups. As for today, my presentation will be centered, like I said, on the thematic of human trafficking and sexual exploitation in fragile countries, but also our recent experience in Canada, because yes, this problematic does not have any borders, and it's a very present one in North America as well. And if we have time, I would like to finish also this presentation with a reflection about our role as an international NGO towards our own human rights problematics in Canada, and how the North South dynamics is more than ever going through changes. So as per the crime of human trafficking, which is often linked to criminal organization, is a particularly worrying phenomenon in the Americas. It affects women and girls in a preponderant and differentiated manner. According to the report of 2018 by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the girls represent the largest number of victims detected in Central America, followed by women. Altogether, they count for more than 80% of victims of human trafficking in the region. Also, according to UNODC, the number of girls victims of human trafficking in the region remains among the largest percentage recorded worldwide. Only in Guatemala, for example, we estimate around 15,000 girls in sexual exploitation networks, and we only register around 300 to 500 of these victims every year, and when we count for less than 15 successful legal cases every year in this country. So we can see that there's a huge gap between the number of victims, the number of legal needs and access to justice, and the effective persecution of this type of crime. So despite the efforts of public officials to improve the institutional response to the crime in recent years through the adoption of new laws and the creation of specialized units of prosecutor, the fight against impunity and for the access to justice remains a very real challenge in the region. We are right now concluding a 3.5-year project on human trafficking in the Northern Triangle of Central America that allowed us to create ongoing partnerships to support specialized legal services and other mechanisms to support victims. In order to fill the gaps in the institutional and civil society response to the victim needs, we have also signed agreements with attorneys general, the Supreme Court, and judiciary organs, and obviously frontline NGOs that provide legal assistance to victim and litigate cases. One important lesson learned has been the role played by civil society organizations in order to fill this institutional gap, to offer an adequate response, assistance, and protection to the victims, and in particular to offer a service continuum to the victims. The civil society organization, they operate the main shelters and facilities that house victims of trafficking, but also play a key role in the judicial process that guarantees victims access to justice, because in Central America, they can participate directly as a party in the prosecuting of human traffickers by becoming a civil party. So they allow to hear or to transmit the victim's voice and to ensure an effective legal process. Therefore, we have identified that the civil society is essential to fill the gap or fill the void left by often underfunded or ineffective state institutions. And as we saw, there are very few cases that have been identified and litigated as cases of human trafficking in the region. And therefore, every single case is crucial for strengthening the legislative and judicial framework around human trafficking. This is what we call strategic litigation. Organizations have support in many NGOs or civil society organizations in improving their strategic mechanism, and by offering them several tools, technical support, legal support, and very needed resources in order to offer a better legal response to the needs of the victims. And we also identified that the victims of human trafficking require not only legal support, but also a comprehensive and holistic assistance. For example, victims rescued in a country, migrants rescued in a country can be repatriated in their home country without coordination with local authorities or with due respect of a legal process, leaving victims in a precarious situation without any legal assistance, and they often come back to their home country where the main danger originated. So we identified the need for inter-agency coordination, international collaboration. We've worked in coordination groups by assisting prosecutors in their international investigation, by providing technical and financial support to existing coordination mechanism. So these are many of the ways that we try to support the existing mechanism, but also reinforce the capacity of state actors and civil society organization to offer a better response to this type of crime. I would like to make a comparison. I would say we're another form of vehicle for international donors as we implement projects in a very specific and technical legal fields by assuring that the state actors have the adequate resources and knowledge to respond to their legal, international obligations. And by working in complementarity with state actors and civil society organizations, we join forces in order to promote the respect of human rights, and in particular, the victims' rights. In terms of capacity building, we have not only we have a local team trained in human rights and international law, but as an international organization, we also take advantage on our networks of contacts to foster exchanges on good practices and experiences abroad. For example, we have invited experts from Canada, and in particular, the specialized unit to fight pimping and sexual exploitation of Montreal Police, to participate in a regional forum in Central America, in which state actors of several countries attended a 3-day forum in order to exchange and share their experiences on investigating mechanism, investigation techniques, and other way to prosecute effectively the crime of human trafficking. But also, we noticed that the Montreal Police had a very interesting approach regarding the attention to the victims, as we call it, a victim-centered approach. And we find it to be a real breakthrough in their local practices, and to put it simply, it consists of putting the interest of the victim at the center throughout the whole investigation process, which also mean to assume the responsibility for their care and protection before prosecuting the suspected criminal. So we found this approach really inspiring and innovating. So we try to take advantage of this new connection that we have with the Montreal Police and build a partnership in order to have a series of exchanges and to plan to work on building some information sheets that we could use as a sensibilization campaign in order to export their approach, and hoping that it can also inspire other actors in Latin America working on these problematics. So we have, in today's world, we have noticed that these type of exchanges is more and more accessible, and we are seeing an even more fluid interaction with international law experts around the globe, given the actual context of the pandemic. It's easier to connect at low cost which also means that we can decentralize even more our knowledge, our action, our experiences in regards to certain problematics, which, as the human trafficking, is a worldwide problematic. So I would say the last step, we are also working to go even further in looking to find ways to connect with telephone to those vulnerable population in very remote areas, which in my opinion is the very last step in order to reach to really be able to transmit communications and information to the most vulnerable groups. And as a last thought or reflection on this topic, from my perspective, the North and South dynamic in international cooperation is going through changes. At least we are working through this type of change in order to see a more South to North exchanges as well. We also intend to work, we always intended to work in complementarity and partnership with civil society organizations and human rights defenders on the field. However, we also started to realize that there were many valuable lessons and practices that we could replicate and use in our own struggle for human rights in Canada. Apart from the human trafficking problematic that I mentioned earlier, which I believe our judicial system and prosecutors have much more resources to effectively fight this problematic, I would say that the situation is different in regards to more social problematics, as for example, the reconciliation process and the due respect of Native rights in Canada. I believe there's a lot to learn from what we see on the ground, what we see from civil society organization in other countries in the Americas. And this is why we are also finding ways to bring our lessons learned abroad to Canada. We hope it can yield some concrete project proposal within the government, Canadian government, or potential collaborations here with the civil society. And so this will be my last thought on this topic, and I hope that as an intermediate, we should use our network of contact to foster those exchanges and change this dynamic, this North-South dynamic, which traditionally has always been the relation we had with international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. I've got a bunch of questions that have come in, but I'll start. Sri, you said you had a question or a comment, so unmute yourself and let us know what you're thinking, please.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Arnaud, for opening our eyes to an issue we know is there, but we probably do not pay much attention to. Anyway, I have a common sense question. What I'm trying to ask is, many of these girls or women who are victims of this organizations or whatever, because of the consequences they may face afterwards, or because of the fear, or because what will happen if they return to the country, would they refuse help? If they refuse help, how would you handle it? I'm thinking many of them would not want to be rescued, would not want to, be saved from a situation they are already in because of the consequences they may face later back in their countries. How would you deal with those? That's my question.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question, because we always see those type of problems that are surging from especially from this type of problematics, which is very linked to our criminal gangs and very important networks of criminal activity. And we saw that And this was the change that has been operating in Montreal specifically. Their specialized unit has started to change their practices through a more victim-centered approach, which the main focus is to build a relation of confidence with the victim, of empathy, and to try to offer social services and protection assistance through several types of services to the victims before they even consider going through interrogation and to find some proof for a legal process. So they see that there are many victims that just will never be interested in going through a legal process, obviously. And this is why they have started a program named Les Survivantes, so the survivors, which only focus on bringing social assistance to victims and to share their voice in order for other victims to know that this type of problem of situation can be changed, and there exists help and support for these type of victims in order to change their course of their life without going through a very long and arduous legal process. So there are two types of what they realize that there are two ways that and the non-legal, non-judicial way can benefit even more victims that has all the weight and that believe they are stuck in their own world. It gives them support and confidence, and this is the most important thing that someone very vulnerable need in this situation. So they have developed this program named Les Survivantes at the Montreal Police, and we believe it's a very good practice in order to offer social support to victims of this crime, which not even 20 years ago were mostly treated as criminals. When you see a sex worker on the street 20 years ago, even in Montreal street, they were seen as criminals by the police, and this has fostered a very negative vision of the police in general, and the victims never thought that they could receive some help from the state. So they're trying to change this relation and give all the tools necessary to the victims in order for themselves to build their trust and to leave this circle of violence.
Thank you, Arnaud. You have explained it very well, the process. Thank you.
Susan Buscemi, you have a question?
Yes, Arnaud, thank you. That was an amazing presentation. My question is about sex tourism. How great a role does that play in sex trafficking?
Yes, actually, I have to say I don't have many statistics about this type of issue. I know that sexual exploitation and pimping is one of the main concerns of human trafficking in Canada and also in Central America. But sexual tourism is very real in certain states. We know, well, the main populars are Asian destinations, but it's also very real in Central America. But unfortunately, I don't have any statistics or concrete facts about the situation in Canada. But like I said, the pimping situation, the pimping problematics is one of the most prosecuted type of crime in Canada. And so it's an ongoing problematics. They are finding new tools in order to better identify the victims and offer them tools for them to speak out, because the change has to come from the victims. We have noticed that even though we have the best tool for investigation, if the victim does not collaborate, there will never be a real prosecution process. So the main focus here is really to empower the victims and to give them tools in order for them to speak out. So I don't know if this response, unfortunately, I don't have more facts, but this is my my first reflex when you talk about sexual tourism.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, you're muted.
We'll try that again. Here's another one here, Arnaud. It's great to hear that the Montreal police have a unique, innovative approach with regards to placing the victim as the priority. Now, is there a program to teach other police forces this approach? RCMP, Sûreté du Québec?
Yes, they do. And actually, the team is called, in French, is the Équipe intégrée de la lutte contre le proxénétisme. So it would be, I try to find a translation, and there are several translations possible, but it's a specialized unit, integrated team on fight against pimping.
Yeah.
And you can find it on the websites, and it's relatively new. I would say not even 3 years. They have an ongoing program, a specialized unit specifically attending to fight against pimping and sexual exploitation. And in the course of our discussion with them, they told us that they are ongoing through to formation process, and they are also teaching other police forces around the country, not only in Quebec with the Sûreté du Québec, but some city police, but also in Toronto. They have discussions with polices in France. And so they are really ongoing through a process of training other police forces units in order to better respond to the victims' needs in those type of cases.
Thank you. John Donovan, you had a question.
Okay, I'm unmuted, I hope.
You're good, yeah.
Okay. Your talk, Arnaud, thank you. And it put me in mind of a recent novel, which I just read. It's by Montreal lawyer Peter Kirby. It's called Open Season, and it deals with trafficking, and especially the problems that the victims have in trying to get out of it. I would recommend this book. It's quite recent, and it's an award winner, Open Season by Peter Kirby. And I'm wondering, since he is a lawyer, does he have any association with Lawyers Without Borders that you know of?
Thank you for your recommendation. I'm taking notes of this book, which I haven't heard of, but I would be very interested in reading it. Because our relation with Canadian forces and police units is relatively recent. We don't work with, I don't know personally of Peter Kirby. I don't think we had any relation with him. But we also work with, like I said, we invite international experts through different activities that we can carry out in our different projects. So this type of collaboration is really important to us, and I'm taking notes of, obviously, of this book.
It's Linda Leith Publishing.
Okay.
It's in paperback. I forget where I got it, but it's still in print, so it can be ordered. It's a 2015 novel.
Okay,
and
super.
It won the Arthur Ellis Award, and it's right on topic. So
perfect. Thank you for that.
I've put it in the chat box. Peter Kirby, Open Season, for your reference. Okay, I'm going to jump around here with a few different questions. One of the things that came up, this is kind of a combined thing here, I think, but how does your funding work? Do you receive government money from any international countries involved? And what about medical, psychiatric fees and needs of reintegration? Do the girls get placed with families? Like, where does all this money come from?
Very, very good question. Actually, as a international corporation, NGO, we work through projects. So this is basically, they are open projects by donors, which are mainly governments, so state donors, which present a project as type of appel d'offres. I don't know, an appel d'offres et
a request for bid or a request
Call
for
for tenders.
call for
tenders,
tenders.
thank
Yeah, call for
Exactly.
tenders.
So those projects are presented as call for tenders, and every NGOs who believe has the capacity to carry out this project and to attain those objectives, which in a proper way, they present a project, and they have a certain objective, but we are free to decide in which way we believe we will have the most effective measures. So there's a call for tenders. All the NGOs, they apply for this project, and once you have the project, it goes through all the details, all the relation with the government, that every year you have to present some reports about the ongoing projects, and at the end you also have a report to present all the results of the project. But this is mainly how it works. And when you have a certain minimum of projects, you are able to open an office, a local office in a country in which you work. And there are projects, for example, they go through 1 to 5 years. So in those 5 years, there's time to build a legal team. You have local members, and we have our main head office in Quebec, which has benefit from a certain percentage of every project in order to be able to sustain itself. So it's mainly in state donors. We also have private donors. We have, for example, legal offices in Canada that contributes. We can have individual donors, and we try to diversify as much as possible. Right now, we just had approved a project financed by the European Union. So we try to diversify, but I have to say for the main part, they're state donors. And in our case, for example, it's the Canadian government, the federal Canadian government, that finance the most of our projects.
Great, thank you. Thank you to Susan for putting up the link to find the book by Peter Kirby online. The Kindle edition is $7.16. So go for it. What was that? Somebody's cat.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Has COVID changed the numbers or the severity of sexual abuses?
Yes, another very relevant question. For information, I've put in the chat our website if any of you are interested in having more details about our ongoing projects.
Super.
But about the COVID, yes, actually, what we saw since the beginning of the pandemic is that the COVID has exacerbated all the existing vulnerabilities. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And because the poor depend much more on social services, on the services offered by the states, on public services, the health, they rely on the state protection. And what COVID has done, obviously, is they have affected the capacity of the states to give appropriate social assistance. So the population which we work with, which are mainly their beneficiaries are mainly vulnerable groups, they have been highly impacted on the COVID pandemic. We have partners, for example, they are shelters for victims, They can't rely anymore on the finance of the states. So this is where the international organizations and international donors are very important in order to sustain those social services, and which in fragile countries, they don't have the same, I would say, the same layer of social protection than in the north. So yes, every country has been really affected by this, and ultimately it affects much more the vulnerable groups.
What else have I got here? Here's one. What can a group like Rotary do to contribute to the fight against trafficking? Where can we fit in?
This is very interesting because obviously I will preach for my own, I don't know the English expression, but if I can preach for my own paroisse, my own church, I would say there are several ways to contribute to our work. For example, it would be to identify international organizations which are trying to tackle this problematic, so which are working on these problematics. Obviously, they are the bigger names like Amnesty International or all the Oxfam. They have built a much bigger network and legitimacy, so they benefit from much more donations from governments. But some smaller intermediate size NGOs, they are always struggling on finding some resources in order to implement their work. So as a legal organization, international corporation organization like ours, it will be to find a way to, well, either donate directly to this organization, to donate services, to work as voluntary in our organizations. We, as a first step, there are a lot of people who want to work in a direct way. For our mission, it would be to work as a voluntary in our programs. So there are several ways, and you can find it on our website. For example, you can donate services, offer some services as, for example, if you are an organization in a certain country, you can collaborate with us and offer free services. So in the legal community, for example, we have Canadian lawyers who offer pro bono services for us. So it's an ongoing, there's a lot of charity work in the legal community, and the pro bono, for example, also work in Canada. So when we have thematics that are relevant to Canadian problematics or have links with Canadian problematics, we would contact our networks of Canadian lawyers, which can offer pro bono services to us. So this is another way. If you have any type of relevant service offer that can be a use to us. For example, in a recent case of corruption in IT, which was very mediatic, in which they have a senator in IT have bought a house in Laval, Quebec. We have consulted Canadian lawyers in order to help us in to work on this case, which our partners in IT is now ongoing litigation, or they have ongoing efforts to tackle this case. So there are many ways in which cases in other countries affects Canadian affairs, and in this way, we can benefit from services of Canadian companies or organizations. If not, the donations will be I would say the short response.
Maybe one last question here. Do Lawyers Without Borders run into the same kind of repercussions that the Médecins Sans Frontières can run into with reprisals, attacks, and that kind of thing in foreign countries? I know that the Médecins are more on the line, maybe the front lines, but do you have this kind of problem also in your organization?
It's obviously the security is always one of our main concerns. And as we work with many human rights defenders on the front line, if we can say, on the field, we always take in account and evaluate all the risk. There are many legal mechanisms for protection of those human rights defenders. So not only we use those mechanisms, but we have certain protocol in place in every country where we work. Because as I said, we can send some voluntary legal advisors from Canada to many countries. We have a big voluntary program for cooperation, and those that coming from Canada, they have a very strict protocol in terms of security, and we also offer protections or resources to the human rights defenders with which we are working in those countries. But obviously we don't have the same type of work than Médecins Sans Frontières, for example. We work behind the computer in an office, but sometimes we do field work, sensibilization campaign, working with victims on the field. And in those situations, yes, we follow a strict protocol, security protocol.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin, would you care to express our thanks to our speaker today? You there, David?
David, as a reminder, it's *6 to unmute yourself.
That's weird. He's still online, is he?
He is, yes.
David, are you there? Okay, we seem to have lost our traditional thanker.
He's there.
Yeah. Can I give you one more chance, David, before I take over? Okay, he may come in a second here, Arnaud, but on behalf of all of us, thank you very much. It's always interesting how we at the beginning we said, oh, we'll talk for 20 minutes and maybe we'll have a couple of questions. Well, by the time you're done, you can take up the hour because there's so many questions to ask. There's so many unknowns, and it's hard for outsiders, I think, to comprehend the in-depth, I guess, character of the work that you do. And as you say, even if you're behind a desk most of the time, it doesn't matter. The interactions between you and your counterparts in these countries, obviously trying to deal with governments. Some governments that I would imagine would be less than forthcoming or helpful to you sometimes. But the work you do, it's got to be frustrating, and you're obviously digging all the time, and that takes special people to go in there and take the time, particularly on a pro bono basis for the most part, to work on this stuff, and particularly in the area of sexual exploitation and trafficking. It's such a lucrative endeavor for the criminals in the world, and so it's never going to stop necessarily, and so it's a hell of a fight that you're putting on. Thanks again for bringing us into your world and making us a little bit more aware of what's going on. Very, very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me, Mr. President. It was a real pleasure to discuss those topics. It's really a topic that is passionate me, so it's a real pleasure, and I hope that it can be wide opening. It was a wide opening discussion for you. So I'll write in the chat the name of the specialized unit in the police, Montreal Police Department. If ever you have any, it can be some of interest for you.
Okay.